All right, thank you very much.
Oh, the student.
Oh, no.
All right,
Thank you
much.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay. Okay. I thought you had it. I thought she had it.
I took care of that. All right, item B11, which is a public hearing and approval of resolution 17/18-04 that Modesto City Schools provides each pupil at K-12 traditional sites sufficient textbooks and/or instructional materials. And this is a public hearing, so I will close the regular meeting and open the public hearing. And Superintendent Abel.
Associate Superintendent Marla Mack will be making this presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Materials from any state source in a physical year, the district must meet the requirements of Education Code Sections 60119. Education Code 60119 requires that the Board of Education shall hold a public hearing and shall make a determination through a resolution as to whether each pupil in each school in the district has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials, or both in each subject area that is consistent with the content and cycles of the curriculum framework adopted by the state board. The district has provided each student pupil at the K-12 traditional sites a standards-aligned textbook or basic instruction materials in history, social science, mathematics, reading language arts, science, foreign language 712, and laboratory science equipment 912. All of the District Williams Act schools passed a sufficiency of materials visit this fall. All other sites have confirmed each pupil has sufficient textbooks or instructional materials. It is recommended that the Board of Education conduct a public hearing and approve Resolution 17/18-04 that Modesto City Schools provides each pupil at K-12 traditional sites sufficient textbooks and or instructional materials.
All right, any questions from the board? Trustee Walker?
I think my question goes to a sort of parallel education code, because my concern is this makes it seem like we're mandated to follow exactly this guideline, but the stamp at the bottom of all the standards then states that anything the state issues is designed as a model, an example. It's not to be prescriptive. It's not a mandate. It's an example. And how do we go about sort of incorporating supplementary materials into this? Because the state approved list is all 100% standard aligned. And it's not a secret that I'm not a fan of that. And if we had supplemental material to put in the hands of especially our economically disadvantaged students who may need other resources that aren't being provided by parents who can go out and get them like I can, to at least fold something like that into this, to acknowledge we have that option, that there is an option, that we don't have to follow everything they give us. It's an example, it's a model, it's not a mandate, but this reads that we have to mandate everything they hand down is my concern. Question, some sort of acknowledgement that there's another option versus everything they give us.
Would you
Stating back to
I don't know.
respond
if
or
this
not
is,
respond.
Well, I was just going to say yes. I mean, I didn't see this as a mandate.
Well, Education Code Section 60119 states that we are to follow the consistent with the content and cycles of the curriculum framework adopted by the state board, and so that would be following this. Mm-hmm. And it does state the timeline we have to vote on it, which is within the 8 weeks. Can I continue on the supplemental?
Yeah.
Supplemental, we do provide supplemental materials, but that's outside the core materials. This here is about the core materials that follows the frameworks.
And which is what I was referring to. I thought this was about this specific thing.
It's not regarding the core materials.
It's not addressing supplemental material.
No. Mm-mm.
All right. So do you have any further questions, Trustee Marks?
So this is just to say that we have a public hearing that's approving the fact that we have sufficient textbooks and or instructional material for each student. They're not in a warehouse, they're not off campus, they're in their classroom, or they have access to it, right?
That's exactly
okay.
right.
All right.
All right. Any other questions from the board? Comments from the public? Welcome again.
My name's Ernest Craven-Neeley. I'm a school teacher. I'm going to ask school board to not pass the sufficiency resolution unless it states our history curriculum is insufficient. The criteria for sufficient, even in this document, says, whereas all K-12 textbooks and instructional materials are reviewed for alignment with the state curriculum frameworks. We have a new framework. It came out in July 2016. Kim Newton's office in the last 2 years, each year I've asked, what are we using for our history curriculum? And I've been told, and I've emailed a letter to all the school board members, we're embedding our history through our reading material. So I'm confused how our reading material aligns with our new state framework. California Department of Education says you can't embed history from reading material. It's on their curriculum materials website, question and answer page. I was talking to Ken McDonald. He works for the Department of Education, History, Social Studies Department. In June, he said no. It would be hard-pressed for a school district to justify using reading material because there are so many standards in the history framework. Another confusing thing is the Williams Act people came to my classroom this year and they wanted to see this. This is the 2007 History Social Studies framework. So I think we're getting a mixed message from our administration where teachers have been told we're embedding through our reading. Williams Act people are told look for this 2007, and this doesn't meet new guidelines in the new framework. So I don't see how these are sufficient. What is sufficient, just like this document says, that we have ensured that what we're using aligns with the new framework. The Education Code 60119 says each child has to have state-adopted textbooks. Well, the Department of Education is not going to publish their new textbooks or adopt their new textbooks until next month. So they're not really available. There's a caveat to that. My understanding is we can use anything that we want to use as long as we've had social content review committees that are ensuring that whatever we're using aligns with this. So that seems like the only alternative to me. So I'm asking school board to say no to the sufficiency resolution because these things are not sufficient. That would give us 2 months to form social content review committees, which I see as our only alternatives to see how we can start aligning with this. This also reflects the Senate Bill 48 Fair Education Law. So you would be killing 4 birds with one stone by saying no. Now, you'd be helping us align with Education Code 60119. You'd be aligning us with the new framework. You would be pointing us in the direction of this new, it's not really new, since 2012, this anti-discrimination law, Senate Bill 48. And then you'd also be pointing us in the direction of Education Code 200, duty to protect, says the LEA has to implement fully any kind of anti-discrimination laws, which is reflected, Senate Bill 48 is reflected through this. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other comments from the public?
President Zwollen, maybe we could have Ms. Mack address his comments, just because they were in open session as well.
I'd be happy to address it. A couple of his comments regarding the embedding of ELA with social studies. That is recommended to embed social studies within our ELA. That's both in the ELA new frameworks and the social studies frameworks. Regarding the adoption of the framework, Mr. Neeley is correct. It is going to the state board in November. That is when we will be provided a list of items to adopt for our K-8 grades. Once that is able to, once we are able to adopt, we are scheduled to start our adoption process for our junior highs and the one-on-one devices, along with our ELA adoption, since they have not adopted ELA at this time. We are scheduled to adopt our K-6 and 9-12 social studies in the fall. So we will start piloting piloting that in the fall. So we're all scheduled to go with the adoption and to follow what Mr. Neeley is suggesting. At this point, to go back to the education code, we are still in compliance with the books that we have. And as I mentioned before, Williams Act saw that correctly too. So even though our book is old for social studies, we still are meeting our students' sufficiency until we adopt a new curriculum.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Trustee Walker.
And the reason that's true is because they passed an extension because there wasn't anything to put in place. And that's the reason why there wasn't this issue that came up before, because they adopted new curriculum frameworks across the board without having any sort of material to support it and go with it, because they completely changed direction 6, 7, 8 years ago as we're into this now. Is that this was the bridge to get us to where we're at. If I'm saying that correctly.
And we were, there was a time was stopped because of the budget. And so now it's getting back caught up. And that's exactly right, Mr. Walker.
Correct, because they had the Great Recession, which put the brakes on everything. In the midst of the great turnover of education curriculum.
Trustee Newman?
I actually have a question for Ms. Mack again. Does our current curriculum, does that address SB 48 now, or is there supplemental material that is addressing that, or are we required to address that at this time while our curriculum is still in compliance?
The law was passed,
yes,
as Mr. Neeley shared with that. But at this time, the new curriculum that when we adopt, will embed that. It's only in 2nd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade that LGBT will be mentioned in the adoption process. But there is many other groups that the law also supports. It's not just one area. So it's meeting, that is just, what I mentioned for the grade levels is for the LGBT, but there is many other groups that need to be supported at the same time, and that also is encompassed in that law.
Right. No, I recognize that SB 48 was broader than what
Much
Mr.
broader.
Neeley was talking about. And the group said it. But again, to reiterate, our current curriculum is still in compliance with what we've given the kids is still in compliance with the law at this time.
It's in compliance with the adoption process. It is not in compliance with the law at this time.
Okay. But the adoption
this
process
year
is in compliance with the law, that with SB 48. So the fact that we're moving towards that is in compliance with the law.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. That
Yeah, it's two
clears it up.
different things. What we're voting on today is
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Walker?
Let me see if I can clarify in my understanding of this also, because it's confusing, and I've done a great deal of reading and digging on this issue, and I think it's also confusing to the public. What the legislature does and passes as far as a law doesn't take effect in education code and curriculum frameworks without the legislation to authorize them to create a framework that then authorizes the legislative authorization process that created the math and the English. That's a result of the RTT money, the Race to the Top money, was authorized with specific legislation to go out and create English and math frameworks. My other argument is they haven't done this with history, and what they did do, which cost out the embedding. The Common Core History Framework specifically only references embedding the history within the English language content. And the other one they have out there is a computer science thing, but that's the disconnect in what the legislature does not mean it goes immediately into the ed code and the frameworks and the curriculum that we get. There's a long drawn out process that has to fold that in, because there's probably 30 different bills out there of everything that somebody in Sacramento wanted to put into history or any other thing that has to then be folded in through review committees and the whole selection process and the whole public input process, which is then what takes multiple years to get done. And in between that, people read the paper and think, oh, I've got this, let's move forward. And they're two different things. If I've got that sort of generalization right.
All right. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, I will close this public hearing so that we can vote. Do I hear a motion to approve item B11? All right. Moved by Trustee Grimbo, seconded by Trustee Marks. All in favor? Oh, excuse me. It's resolution roll call.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Trustee Jimenez.
Aye.
Brown.
Aye.
Grinbo. Marks.
Aye.
Newman. Walker.
Abstain.
President Swallen.
Aye. So it passes with 5 ayes and 1 abstention.